think that this plan meets the minimum that our city needs, because in the last time we had this exercise, we underestimated by twofold the growth that we were going to take up.
Does this, in fact, produce affordable housing? And what I've seen so far is that it does not. And simply equating density with affordability is a lie. It's a myth.
And there you are hearing Council members Dan Strauss and Kathy Moore expressing some differing views on the comprehensive plan, Seattle's roadmap for growth, at an action-packed committee meeting this week for the Seattle City Council. Where will this comprehensive plan land, and what influence will a new council member coming on board have with this legislation? And what about all that public safety work the council is engaging in at the start of this year? Well, there's a lot going on with the city right now, and a lot to discuss this week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast, which is embarking on year 6 of its existence here in January of 2025. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are mine. And joining me once again is my good friend David Croman from the Seattle Times. Happy New Year to you. I got to ask, did you stay up till midnight on New Year's Eve? I know that's a trick question when you have a baby in the house, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, no. Actually, because I have a baby in the house, I volunteered to do some overtime, like breaking news reporting. So I did actually I got close. I got to 11 because they asked me, because they knew there was no way I would be going to any holiday parties.
Right. Well played. I'm glad you were able to enjoy the new year in your own way. I did the polar plunge at Alki, and that gave me plenty of a charge on the day after there. Great to be with you as always, David. Thank you. Thanks also to City Grind Espresso, the background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. Go check them out on the first floor of City Hall. And thanks always to the show patrons. Really need you this new year. If you like the program, if you want to get access to Patrons First content, support the show for the low price of $5 a month. Works out to just more than $1 a podcast. Find the show on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. When you sign up, you'll even get a cool decal, too, so check it out. Big thanks also to Converge Media. The video version of the podcast is on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. And let's get to it. The New Year's celebrations are over. It's time for Right Here, Right Now. David, I wanted to start with the comprehensive plan with you because the council called together this special committee on the comp plan for the first time this week, and there was a little more contentious, I guess. I can't find the right word, but it was a very interesting meeting, and I brought up those sound bites off the top from council members Moore and Strauss. They just seem to have some different ideas about what density means and maybe even the need for density. Tell me some of your takeaways from this meeting and I guess what you're expecting from the council going forward with this process.
Yeah, well, I don't know that there's any issue like housing to get people kind of worked up and riled up. And I guess my takeaway was that is the dynamic that's going to play out on the council too, because I think there has been, I would say, at least since 2015, the last time we had kind of major housing conversations in Seattle, a notable shift towards kind of understanding that supply and demand when it comes to housing prices is a real thing, and the city has not added enough supply, and so therefore, that has aided in the prices going up. But I think the conversation on the council showed that there is still a sort of deep-seated skepticism that, and some of it's rooted in the fact that it's private developers who are building this housing.
Sure.
People used to their neighborhoods the way they are, concerned about trees, whatever it may be, but sort of argument that adding more housing is not does not necessarily mean
add
no housing. It's not the path to affordability.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and then the counter argument to that is that we're growing, and Seattle has to build people will move here one way or the other. It's just who has the ability to do that, and if you add more places, then more people can move here. And so, kind of the value of what that means to be adding more housing and what that gets you. Some people see that as a negative, and some people see that as a positive.
Yeah, that whole idea that Councilmember Moore was bringing up, that the market will take care of things and we're just here to guide the process. That was an interesting piece to me too, because I think that's been the whole push for the council, and really the push behind this plan is to try to change that growth, or at least push that growth in a certain way. And the whole idea that the market can solve this is, I don't know, that doesn't seem to be the guiding ethic behind what the comp plan and what the city of Seattle's efforts on this have been all about over the past 10 years.
Right. But I think in that context, I think that assumes that the city is not already guiding the market.
Okay.
And I think
Okay.
that in the long running argument is that the city, all you have to do is look at a zoning map and you see how much minutia there is into what you can build where
Yep.
and the steps you have to go through to do that.
Right.
You not a value statement on this necessarily, but it is very much true that it is not a free market out there for people to build what they want. And so, I think the argument for adding more zoning capacity and adding, sort of smoothing the process to build housing is that the market could be doing more and that would be a good thing. Some people think the market um, is the enemy, and I think we
Mm,
hear a lot about that when people talk about developers and
sure.
in a sort of negative light. But
Right.
uh, to say that the market is taking care of itself right now, I think kind of does get in the way of the fact that Seattle is very much regulating that market, whether directly or indirectly.
I see what you're saying. I got it. I wanted to talk also about the timing of this plan. I heard Councilmember Rivera bringing up it a few times how the council is getting a lot of this late. They wanted to have these plans a lot sooner. In terms of the deadline they're up against, we're talking about June here, right? That's when the state is saying you have to have these plans in place for the comprehensive plan, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's technically this was supposed to be a 2024 comprehensive plan update. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's already late. Um, the it's late by the deadline of when these comprehensive plan updates are supposed to happen. There's not a lot of enforcement around that, so
Right.
no one in City Hall seems to be that concerned that that deadline has passed. But there is this new deadline of this, HB 110
Yes.
legislation, which requires cities to add more density.
Hmm.
That's the June deadline when they have to sort of show that they're
I
making
got it.
progress
Okay.
towards that.
Okay.
That I suppose could come with a little. I don't know what the penalties on that would be. I don't know if they're financial or what, but yeah, that's the deadline they're coming up against. If there's an appeal to this, which there almost certainly will be, there's some
Mm,
question about if they don't have a plan in place. Which, if there's an appeal, that will almost certainly delay it further. What do they need to do? Do they pass some interim piece of legislation? Do
hmm.
they eat whatever penalty might come their way? I don't know. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, something to look at over the next couple of months. And I did want to talk about this in the larger picture because the comp plan, a massive undertaking for sure, but that's not all the council is up to right now. Front and center, they need a new council member to fill in the spot. Tammy Morales is now vacated with 3 years left on her term. Applications are due for this role by January 9th at 5 p.m. with the city clerk. There will be a public forum on or around January 21st. The council will vote to appoint this new member by the 29th of January. And David, we touched on this before the holiday break, but just these different opinions around the comp plan had me thinking, how important is this new council member going to be when it comes to some big decisions here on the city's growth? What do you think?
Yeah, I think important. I think the conversation between Moore and Strauss showed that there isn't necessarily unanimity on this on the council here. I'll say that Moore has shown herself to be um, a bit of a renegade at times. She is not sort of part of any sort of clear block on the city council. So
Right. I
her
remember her
opinion
talking
doesn't.
about crowd control tactics for the SPD. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and capital gains
Uh-huh.
tax.
Uh-huh.
And so, I don't know how representative her view is of the broader council, but
Mm.
I think the biggest opposition to this plan is coming and will continue to come from a lot of these kind of neighborhood councils and
Yep.
neighborhood groups and things like that. And some of these council members were pretty involved with those before
Hmm.
running. Councilmember Kettle was on the
Yep.
Queen Anne Community Council, and
That's right.
Councilmember Rivera has talked about her concerns around the transparency here, sort of echoing exactly what some of these councils were saying. So
Hmm.
I don't know kind of what all of them believe in their heart of hearts, but I do know that they are likely to be responsive to some of these petitions and advocacies, neighborhood groups that are coming to them. And as we've seen before, that tends to lean in the direction of more conservative growth targets than
Okay.
maybe some people would like.
Okay. Okay. Fair
And
enough.
so all right,
Yeah.
that's all to say that whoever this person is, um, I think has an opportunity actually to dictate the direction of this in a way because it feels a little bit like a jump ball right now. I don't
Yeah.
know exactly, and I don't know exactly where it's going to come down.
Yeah, fair. Any new names emerging for this that you've heard? I know we talked about Randy Engstrom, the former arts and culture director for the city, threw his hat in the ring back in mid-December, the biggest first name I heard of there. Any other names popping up? The city clerk would only tell me that there are 8 people in the mix, but I didn't get all the names. Have you heard anything new on that?
No, I haven't really been spending any time chasing these things down just because we're going to find out in a few days
Yeah,
anyway.
right, 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 right.
No, I haven't heard. As far as I know, Tanya Wu is not planning to apply again, but
Yeah,
you never know. So
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
don't know.
All right. Yeah, we'll see what happens next on that one. But again, 8 so far, and if you'd like to throw your hat in the ring as well, you can do that by the 9th here. So that's the deadline, 5 o'clock with Seattle City Clerk. All right. Well, coming up next, the Seattle City Council is also on the verge of confirming a new police chief. More on that process and what to expect from it. Coming up on Now Hear This. Some news that came out at the end of last year, Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell has selected the chief of Madison, Wisconsin's police department, Sean Barnes, to take the same job in Seattle. So the confirmation process for Chief Barnes in front of the city council scheduled to happen at the end of this month. I'm fairly certain he's going to be facing some questions about how to proceed towards Seattle's goal of quelling street disorder in areas like 3rd Avenue and Chinatown ID, the multi-pronged effort presented by Mayor Harrell as the Downtown Activation Plan.
We need to stabilize these areas, work with service providers to connect those and help and make arrests when necessary. This is a comprehensive approach which allows us to do this.
David, we got this news about Chief Barnes right after we recorded our last podcast of last year. Have you been looking into his work in Madison? Do you have an idea what kind of chief candidate we're going to see later this month?
No, not exactly. I mean, only he's sort of been in some national headlines because of the tragedy that happened in Wisconsin. I don't know a lot about him. I know my colleague Mike Carter has been talking to him and interviewing him. So I haven't done any sort of actual interviewing or like a ton of reporting on him.
Yeah.
I think my sense is because, the search process this time was a little different
Yep.
than it's been in the past. Sometimes they would hire search firms and things like that and find these qualified candidates. This was one of 3 people, and we don't know the other 2 names yet, although presumably we will. I think they're required to disclose all 3 finalists at least at some point. 3 finalists brought that current Chief Surar and former Chief Kathleen O'Toole found. My sense is Kathleen O'Toole in particular really liked this guy, Sean Barnes. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting that he's in some ways the former Seattle Police Chief's handpicked person. And yeah, I get the sense that she was the one really lobbying for him to be nominated.
Interesting. Okay. And I'm bringing this up too because the mayor just put out a press release showing some positive signs on police hiring. Apparently, 2024 was the first positive year of police hiring versus separations since the year 2019. For perspective, the number hired was 84, the separations 83, so a razor-thin margin there we're talking about. And Council President Sarah Nelson also put out a press release this week talking about hiring and then also enforcing the new stay out of areas of prostitution, soap, and stay out of drug areas, SODA laws that the council passed in 2024. And I wanted to bring that point up specifically because we had these neighbors on Aurora Avenue North at the end of last year. They had a shooting in broad daylight with apparently someone who's a known pimp by police here. Police apparently don't have a full policy worked out for soap and soda laws. I just wanted to get into this, David, because I'm trying to figure out how a new chief kind of untangles what's next for soap and soda and maybe even hiring too. Are those 2 the biggest issues that Sean Barnes would face if indeed he is confirmed?
Yeah, I think hiring and then kind of more broadly just disorder.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a big priority for Harrell. I think because it's almost more than anything, it's something that people kind of feel and uh,
And see.
see every
Yeah.
day. And
Mhm.
Harrell has always made that a priority. And so the combination, I think, of it being, a genuine priority of his, plus it's an election year, plus we've got the World Cup coming. This kind of cleaning up disorder, I'm sure, will be a big uh, priority that he pushes Sean Barnes on.
Yeah.
That, like you said, how that's done exactly and the role of these soap and soda zones, I think, is still kind of up in the air. My sense is they really haven't been used
Right.
yet. I don't know how long that's going to take or, what the kind of lasting effect of that is. Some people say it probably won't be very much, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one tool. But then, we saw, as my colleague Kim wrote about, it's a really tricky issue because you can clear out Third Avenue or whatever, but then a lot of folks end up moving to the Chinatown International District. And
Right.
um, so, it's one thing to kind of move people around, but another thing to actually solve the problem. And so, that is not just a police job. And I think the police would probably tell you that as well.
Right, right. And I think this was a big part of the whole downtown activation plan that the mayor has been talking about, because it does involve not only police but some outreach teams as well. I guess I'm really interested to see how much of a team player Chief Barnes would he, again, if indeed he is confirmed, et cetera, because he's going to be working with some different agencies. I think about the United Care team. I think about the care folks that are out there on the streets providing social services, et cetera. I feel like that job is going to be an important one for a new chief too, working with all these different agencies that are involved in these issues like street disorder.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of a growing, I don't know, frustration is the word, or recognition or whatever it might be, that Seattle has a lot of these kind of not quite law enforcement
Yeah, right.
groups, but city, some of them official through the city, some of them kind of nonprofits, some of them their
Hmm.
own organizations, some of them, just people like out there doing stuff that don't
Yeah.
really work that well together, I
Mm.
think, which is so, it's a noble goal to kind of set up alternatives to police, but if they're not kind of coordinating and don't have sort of a shared goal in mind, they can, I think, kind of step on each other. And so I do think kind of coordinating that. I don't know that will be the police chief's job, just because, kind of by definition, they're supposed to not be police led.
Agencies, yeah. Hmm.
But at the same time, I think most of the people who are involved with those organizations understand that it does require a lot of coordination with the police.
Yeah, yeah. No, that'll be an interesting thing to check out as well. I did want to talk about another story that, folks, if you're listening, you might miss this one this week, but it's happening in the Housing and Human Services Committee. There's a report about race and social justice when it comes to homelessness and housing. And David, I saw this report. I thought it was very interesting. I think it shows something we've known for a while, that the numbers aren't really improving here. You've got half of the population of homeless people in King County, about 51% in the latest point in time count. Half of those people are white. That just about matches up with white people making up 53% of the overall county population. But then you have 19% of the population of homeless people here are black, and black people make up only 6% of King County's overall population. Then 7% of the homeless population is Indian, Alaska, Native, or Indigenous, and that only makes up 1% of the overall population. I know we've seen reports about this before, but what do those numbers tell you?
Yeah, they tell me that there's a lot going on. I mean, it's that this goes deep,
Yeah.
and goes far upstream. And um, I think one thing that I've heard a lot about, sort of the most interesting explanation of this is just this question of like, how much of a safety net do you have if you fall into hard times? And
Hmm.
all our available data shows that kind of African American, Black populations, and Native populations, in general experience more poverty and hardship, so that if
Hmm.
an individual falls onto hard times, the chances that they have a family or something that
A
can
network,
take
yeah.
them in, or has that kind of, well, and I'm sure they have a great social network, but whether or not those people are capable of supporting, in addition to themselves, somebody else who needs it. And so I think it says that there's yeah, maybe a thinner line for some of those folks than you know some of the white folks.
Yeah.
And it's, this is not new. And you can look at pretty much every level of the system,
Yeah.
and you will find a similar outcome, be it jail or hospital or
Hmm.
homelessness or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's pretty pervasive.
Yeah, and I know this city council is very interested in the next steps for the Regional Homelessness Authority. Seattle's its biggest funder, and they want to keep some close tabs on this. But I also thought it was interesting to see, when it comes to people renting or owning homes, the overarching stat in this report is that 40% of people in Seattle are cost burdened when it comes to paying for a place to live. That means they're paying more than 30% of their income in housing costs. And the low income BIPOC people in King County, well, nearly 65% of them are renters. They don't own a home compared to about 50% of white people. I thought this was really interesting, David, because, and maybe you're looking back at something that Kathy Moore was saying in a comprehensive plan meeting, this whole idea there doesn't seem to be a good pathway to help low income people to ever build any equity and actually own a place in Seattle. That's a huge frustration. I get what people are doing to create these rental units, but this path to ownership is really difficult at best.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think that was one of what Kathy Moore was talking about, that have to create those paths. The path to a single family home, we're not adding any more of those.
Right, right.
There's not. And so what that looks like, I think um, we've seen a few kind of small efforts of maybe it's super low interest loans or even some, subsidized homes that can be purchased.
Hmm.
That's a small fraction of where kind of public dollars are going. Most of them tend to go to, subsidized affordable housing,
Right.
kind of apartments and things like that, that the people are renting or giving what they can to pay.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think as far as Seattle goes, there has been some talk about condo laws and what can be done to kind of open up the market a little bit more to condos instead of just
Hmm.
rentals. I don't know the backstory on that, but that's always kind of an interesting conversation, is why Seattle doesn't have more condos than it does. But if the goal is to have a nice bungalow on Queen Anne with
Yeah.
a garden in the backyard, I think that ship is frankly sailed.
Yeah, no, good luck with that. I know my wife and I purchased a home here in Seattle in 2002 and paid more than at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, we're paying $239,000. What are we doing? We're throwing our lives away. But gosh, yeah, now that home is worth pretty close to $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's daunting, and I appreciate engaging with that because this whole idea of how many people are renting in Seattle is always a number that gets thrown out there. But the backstory of people not being able to own is a piece of this too. All right, well,
Well,
coming up. Oh,
and
yeah, go ahead, David.
I think also, the last few years, interest rates being what they are, have probably driven more people to. Um, I think there's probably been more incentive to maybe build rental units, and then certainly has driven more people towards rentals. Some even people who thought they had the money to buy, interest rates go up, and suddenly that doesn't go as far, and so people, kind of more people going into the rental market by that route.
Yeah, very important point, and it's not always a smart financial decision to buy a place either. That's a
No.
good observation. All right, well, coming up, some news that might have snuck by at the end of last year, like Santa Claus heading up the chimney. There was a lawsuit from Uber targeting the city of Seattle. We're going to find out what's the latest on this coming up on What's Next. David, I wanted to touch on the story you put out near the end of last year about Uber suing the city of Seattle in federal court over this law the city passed that regulates when delivery drivers can get booted off the platform. The law was set to go into effect January 1st. I know you've been looking at this and updating this. Where are we with this case right now?
Yeah, so Uber basically said that it was a violation of their First Amendment rights because they were being required to write a policy kind of laying out when somebody would be deactivated. They said that they disagreed with the policy and didn't want to be forced into making it sound like they were endorsing it.
Hmm.
Federal judge disagreed with that late last year. I think she signed her order on New Year's Eve, late New Year's Eve, which allowed the law to go into effect on January 1st. Basically, she said, this law does not regulate your speech. You're free to tell anyone you please that you disagree with it, and you can send out posts and do whatever you want. But what you can't do is ignore the regulations here, which is regulating the conduct of the company, not the speech of the company, is what
I see.
she basically came up with. So now, if you're a delivery driver in Seattle, the company, in theory, needs to go through more hoops before they're allowed to kick you off the platform. I think it's going to be some time before the law is being fully enforced, but
Yeah.
that's where we are.
Right. And where do you see this going? And I bring this up because you've brought this up before too, this whole idea of the city council working with these different the gig economy, basically, trying to regulate a minimum wage for app-based delivery drivers. That kind of came and went last year. I know that Councilmember Hollingsworth was trying to extend minimum wage tip credits to businesses, so they're working on that business space too. But I just wanted to take it bigger picture here, and what does this, failed lawsuit mean in terms of the Seattle City Council's overall connection to, I'll start, I guess, with the app-based world and then the business world in general, small businesses in Seattle.
Yeah, this is very much a relic of the past city councils. In fact, Sarah Nelson, who is now the president, voted against this bill when it came forward. It took a really long time for it to get implemented, so it's still kind of the tail of the previous city council, which once upon a time there was a goal to actually allow gig workers to unionize in Seattle. That kind of failed, but in lieu of that, the Seattle City Council has been kind of basically carrying out contract bargaining by legislation on behalf of these drivers by, you said, minimum wage and working conditions and things like that.
Sure.
That era is barring a new sweep in the next election that is currently dead. I would say that era. The city council is not interested in doing that. They actually tried to roll back some of these regulations, or at least sort of tweak them for minimum wage for delivery drivers. That, of course, failed, but this city council is not interested in being in the business of regulating app-based companies anymore, I don't think. And so, I would say this is kind of the last piece, at least for a while, that we will see come out of City Hall around kind of adding new regulations to the gig work economy.
Yeah, interesting to see if they'll be able to tackle that sometime this year again. I mean, when you think of the comp plan, all the stuff that's going on with public safety, et cetera, I'm interested to see just kind of what kind of workload they're going to be able to take on with all these different pieces they're dealing with here. But David, we do need to wrap up here, and here we are sitting about a month-ish away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. I'm sensing a little bit of impatience from you on social media when it comes to the Mariners and their off-season moves here. What's going on, or what isn't going on, maybe is the better question.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like nothing. I don't understand. My theory is they're just sort of waiting everybody out, and are going to make a team out of scraps.
Oh man,
which is depressing. But I'm open to being proven wrong.
I know, as we are every year with this, David. We got to figure out a year when we can make this work and actually go to a game, feel good about it, and feel good about the entirety of the season. So we shall see. Jerry DePoto, this is your message. You need to wake up and make it happen. I think so too. David, thank you as always for joining me here. And thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks also to patrons who support the show. If you're not a patron, please do join in. Jump in for $5 a month. Find the podcast on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Listen on Apple, Spotify, wherever you'd like to tune in. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. We will see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2020.